And that takes us to the final installment of our two-week-long series that we call Obama and the World. Tonight, our focus is China, and we're joined by Adam Siegel. He's a senior fellow in China Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, and by John Delury, the associate director of the Center for U.S.-China Relations at the Asia Society right here in New York. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thank you for being with us.
Yes.
So 100 years from now, is this going to be viewed as the period that China started to assume global supremacy? Should the United States be worried?
Well, China's got a lot of room to grow, and they have a huge population. When you look at at least in economic terms, they're expected to surpass Japan this year as the #2 size economy in the world. They've surpassed Germany as top exporting country. Now, of course, on the flip side, you have to divide all that by 1.3 billion people. So the per capita numbers, I mean, it's still a very poor country. And a lot of what we're hearing now sometimes gets exaggerated when it comes to, there's a lot of anxiety being projected on China.
Do you believe, Adam, that it's exaggerated?
I do. I think there's two issues. I think one is China has fundamental weaknesses that we forget about, that it is still overwhelmingly a poor country. It has massive environmental issues, social inequality. But I think the other issue is that if China were to be accepting responsibilities, in fact, in the international system, that would be a good thing for the United States. If we saw China taking more responsibility, for example, for rebuilding Afghanistan or putting more pressure on Iran and North Korea. But what we've seen so far is that the Chinese actually seem to be lagging, that given how big their international economy is, given how important they are as an economic player, politically they're not playing the same role. And I think that actually is the biggest problem for the United States right now.
Some of the lagging may be strategic. It could be intentional on China's part, and Deng Xiaoping kind of set out a foreign policy motto of sort of keeping your head down and waiting for the right time. And I think that probably still does guide a lot of China's foreign policy. If you look at something like the idea of G2, which is being talked about in Davos, I guess, right now, this idea of the United States and China forming these two, new bipolar order, there's a lot of resistance from China because it's really not in accord with their approach. But I think they're playing a long-term game where they, again, driven by economics, are building up the political capital, and they're not eager to accept the burdens of responsibility right now.
Let's get into some of the points of friction, the sore points in the U.S.-China relationship. One source of disagreement is the U.S. arms sales to Taiwan. Why are the Chinese so upset about this, and why is the United States going to go ahead with it?
Well, the Chinese consider Taiwan to be a part of China, and the United States, in fact, agreed that we would slowly wind down our arms sales to Taiwan, given the situation in the region, that as it became more peaceful, we would slowly wind down. We haven't done that because we don't really actually believe that the situation has become more peaceful. And the Chinese continue to threaten Taiwan militarily, primarily by about 1,000 short-range missiles that are targeted at Taiwan.
Is this something, do you think, that could potentially derail U.S.-China relations in the future?
The Taiwan issue, I mean, from the Chinese perspective, it's always the most sensitive and explosive. But right now, I mean, there's a lot of positive trends in terms of cross-strait relations, and Beijing likes the current government a lot in Taiwan. So it's actually a relatively tranquil period that we're in. So it's not at the top of the list of hotspots.
And collectively, Taiwan is sort of referred to as one of the three T's, trade, obviously, and Taiwan and Tibet being the other two issues. And the president is expected to have a meeting with the Dalai Lama at some point. Previously, that meeting had been delayed. What's on the cards in terms of Tibet, the United States, and China?
I wouldn't expect for any major breakthroughs. I think the president is going to try to recapture some ground that he lost when he deferred that meeting, and basically say that, yes, the United States would like a resolution of the Tibet situation. We would like the Chinese to give the Tibetans more autonomy, more cultural and religious space, but we're not going to fundamentally change our view, which is that Tibet is part of China.
Right. Why do you think that the president changed his mind?
Well, I think that he wanted to make a gesture and defer the visit with the Dalai Lama. And he didn't get much back from the Chinese for it, and I think the administration was probably pretty upset about that. So it's not surprising that he's going ahead with a meeting now. There are evidently meetings going on as we speak in Beijing between representatives of the Dalai Lama and the Chinese government. So there may be some marginal progress there. I would agree. We're not talking about big breakthroughs. The other big thing to remember with Tibet is ultimately it really is a domestic issue. There may be lobbies that care about it in the United States, but it is very much a domestic issue. And within China, there's a huge segment of the Han, ethnically Han majority population who are fully supportive of some of the hardline policies in Tibet. So when Chinese policymakers are thinking about Tibet, their first thought is not Washington.
Let's talk about trade. What are the areas of disagreement there?
Well, the major concern is the valuation of the renminbi. That China still has pegged its renminbi. It hasn't moved in quite a while. We had some valuation of about 30% in the years running up. But the United States, given its economic situation, given this rising unemployment rate, given the president, as he mentioned last night, his focus on jobs, there's going to be an increasing pressure on China to do something about renminbi, which makes Chinese exports cheaper to the United States. So that, I think, is going to be the primary issue.
If you talk to Chinese economists, what they're concerned about is not so much the renminbi, but they're concerned about the fact that they have a very unstructured economy that's dependent on exports and investment and doesn't have enough consumption, and they're not dealing with that issue.
All right, John Delury, Adam Siegel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.